It is so easy for an organisation to say, we believe in mentoring. But what does that actually mean? And what does it actually look like? I am Sue Taylor, and you are listening to another in the Sitting with Sue podcast series on mentoring. And sitting with me, as usual, is Stephen Helman from Exchange Street. And my other guest will be known to many of you. He is Luke Brannigan from Crawford and Company. So, just before I start with the cross-examination, Luke, do you want to briefly explain your career journey so that it becomes obvious why you are here today?
Thanks, Sue. So I've been in insurance for 25 years, pretty much the entirety of my career. I joined Zurich in 1999, handling motor claims, moved to a couple of different insurers and a couple of brokers before I joined JB Robbins in 2005 as a trainee adjuster. So I went through various different loss adjuster jobs. Joined Davies, Cunningham Lindsay, so obviously became Sedgwick. And then I joined Crawford 2 years ago, really to look after the people development, sort of talent management function at Crawford. The last couple of years I was at Sedgwick, I did much the same job, including managing the grad program, as well as some of the technical and professional development projects that we had over there.
So I think that's probably now obvious why Luke is involved in this discussion. But as far as I can see, most firms don't really know what it is they want to actually achieve when it comes to mentoring. And I always think it's really important that there are a clear set of objectives. But Luke, am I being a bit harsh or not?
No, I don't think you are. When we talk about mentoring, a lot of the mentoring programs that I've seen, it lacks some sort of strategic focus or sort of coherency in terms of what the firms are trying to achieve. There's lots of different elements to mentoring. There's formal mentoring, informal mentoring, and a lot of that is sort of built around the culture of the organization. And a lot of the time when you see mentoring, it's sort of seen as a bit of a HR buzzword, but it's not always clear how that fits into what the firm's actually trying to achieve. And that's probably, my opinion is, honestly, HR as a function isn't really involved in setting the strategy around sort of developing loss adjusters a lot of the time, because maybe it's more transactional HR, but I think there is definitely a place for that function to be much closer to operations and to support that. And a lot of the time you see a mentoring program with organizations, which is half in and half out of HR, maybe it's split between HR and operations. And it needs to be a whole firm's focus, I think. And that's really where I come in from a culture point of view as well.
So Stephen, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's too split and divided between the areas, or what do you actually see?
I do. I think I agree with Luke. I think, I've been recruiting for adjusters for, 17 years. And during that time, I've seen many a program come and go, many kind of transient things. And it's sort of like we want to do this and we're going to put this in place. And then it just seems to evaporate and disappear. And I think it's only recently that I've seen some firms get really serious and try and take a more kind of whole company view, as Luke is talking about trying to set up a program that involves everybody. Because otherwise, I think it can be a nice idea and a nice aspiration, and it either just kind of gets forgotten about once things get busy, and once, if there's a surge or something, and adjusters, especially if there's a kind of more of an informal thing, or we're going to pair this adjuster with this adjuster, this young adjuster, or when that older adjuster's caseload builds up and they want to be doing that, which is their main job. And I think it just does need to be a really strategic approach, as Luke says, that involves everybody.
I was just going to say, that's one of the main things I've seen certainly in my career. And, I've had some really great mentors through the last sort of 25 years in my career, but loss adjusting, I think is the one part of the industry where we're so operationally sensitive, right? So obviously where we're just recording this a couple of days after Storm Bert has battered the UK. Bits of my fence were flying around the garden on Saturday afternoon. And immediately, that some of the mentoring sort of stuff, which has been maybe planned for a few months, that all just goes out the window, unfortunately. And that's a real shame.
And that's because the loss adjusters are having to actually be out there on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see that with training as well, immediately at the point where training can be most valuable, it's more often than not the operational needs of the business which take over. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do, because obviously we're in industry where the customer's needs obviously take precedence. And I'm not saying it shouldn't, but that's the reality.
Yes, because that's the day job. I mean, but again, Luke,
Mm.
do you think therefore that mentoring is just one of the tools in talent management?
It's really interesting because talk a lot about talent and talent management. And I think if you look at the profile of talent that coming into the profession in 2024, it's different from when it was in 2014 and 2004 and 1994. And the people coming into the profession, they are looking for different things. Okay. So me, as I'm sort of midway through my career in my mid 40s, I'm looking for something. When I'm talking to people who are mentoring me, I'm looking for different types of input than someone who's 22 and initially just coming into the organization. It is one of a bundle of resources that an organization's got to actually develop its people. And a lot of the time, organizations need to be more accepting and more nimble and maybe more agile, maybe if that's the right term, in terms of the solutions that they put in place for people development. So actually, if you look at someone who's 22 in the organization now, they will work differently than I did when I was 22. And I think mentors or a program of mentoring around the business or around an organization has got to flex to achieve that, to meet where the talent is, essentially.
So again, addressing this to you, Luke, I mean, from what you're talking about, there's a strong link with culture. Obviously, there's a strong link between culture and mentoring. So is it really important to make sure that you have the right culture in a business in order to reap the benefits of mentoring?
Yeah, so culture is obviously really important. And uh, one of the phrases I like saying is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And essentially what that means is it doesn't matter how good your strategy is. If your culture of the organization is not set up to support mentoring, just not going to happen, right? And I think it's one of the key sort of risks when you look at mentoring in an organization. Formal mentoring very much is dependent on whether the culture can support it, right? And this sort of goes back to what we were saying earlier. If you look at the organizational needs or imperative for a mentoring program, we want to develop our people. And this is one of the ways we're going to do it. You've got to make sure that you've got the culture right to actually support it. And I think if you don't have coaching and mentoring embedded all layers of the organization, whether it's in loss adjusting or leadership, or if it's in IT or even in the HR department, it's not going to happen.
And Stephen, you obviously see an awful lot of different cultures in organizations. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree. You can have the best laid plans, and if it's not ingrained into the organization culturally, then it's probably not going to achieve what you want it to, and it's going to lead to some frustrated people. I see companies where they've got it right and they're reaping the benefits from that, and then there are companies that pay lip service to it or want to do it and have the best intentions, but they haven't cascaded that properly through the organization, and therefore it doesn't get done properly. And that's when you find particularly younger adjusters feel like they're kind of dangling in the wind a bit and not getting the support that they want and need. And, to an extent that can still happen where organizations are getting it mostly right. You'll still unfortunately get people who fall through the cracks for whatever reason, but they get it right more than they don't. But in other organizations where they haven't quite got it figured out, like Luke suggested, that's when I think you see adjusters getting frustrated and either wanting to move companies or just completely leave the profession.
I mean, in certain companies, what you do actually see is that there's almost a sort of perception that mentoring is selective or elitist. Now, do you think that's the right thing to do, or should it be available to everyone? Luke, go first.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about when you talk about how you manage talent in an organization, right? So the way I see it is two ways of looking at it. You can either have mentoring for everyone. Okay. So you have inclusive. So everyone gets the opportunity for mentoring, coaching, training, development, all the rest of it. And you would probably argue that that's the nicest thing to have. That's the ideal. The problem is with that is that resources are limited, time is limited, people are limited in terms of the time and the investment they can put in. Conversations I've had certainly the last 5 years are we want to get the most bang for our buck in terms of putting time and energy into a mentoring program or any kind of development program. The other sort of way of looking at it is you select your chosen few, right? Your special group, and maybe you have a graduate program or you have a specially selected cohort of loss adjusters who are going to be developed into the next major loss adjusters. I don't think there's really a good or a bad way, or do you want to go this way or another way? I think my sort of take on that is you want to take the best bits from an inclusive approach and the best bits from an exclusive approach. The exclusive approach is great because you can focus all your energy into maybe 5, 10, 15, 20, depends on the size of your organization, a few people, and those will be your chosen leaders or your leaders of the future or your major loss adjusters of the future. And as long as you can keep hold of those people, that's where you'll see your most return on investment. It's one of a sort of bundle of solutions which firms need to get smarter at actually designing and executing in the business. Whether it's right to say everyone should have the opportunity for mentoring, I think you could spend another hour talking about that. I think realistically, I always come back to when I'm having conversations in the business, it's what we're trying to achieve, right? Let's be very clear about what we're actually trying to achieve. Is it leadership? Is it technical? Let's draw the boundaries really clear, and then we can make sure that everyone knows what we're going to get.
Which goes back to one of the first points about is that you have to be clear about what it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But mentoring, as we've discussed before, you've got the difference between the practical aspects of the day-to-day job, which is mentoring on the job. And then there's some of the wider aspects of mentoring, such as the networking aspects of it, which could actually be open to more people than just those that are centered around the day-to-day job. So, Luke, do you have any views on that aspect of it then?
Even within this conversation, we're actually identifying the different strands of what we call mentoring. Okay. So, at Crawford, we've got major loss adjusters that we sit in the business and we say to them, look, your only job is to develop that up and coming talent in the organization. So from a technical perspective, that is case reviews, report reviewing, giving feedback, all that sort of stuff, which certainly when I was early in my career as an adjuster, I was really fortunate to have, some really smart, intelligent adjusters working with me, and I learned a lot from them. So actually their only job is actually to develop that talent in the organization, because we're clear on both sides what the expectations are, what you can expect to achieve. This person's going to sit with you and they're going to give you feedback on your cases and how you are putting your reports together and your overall sort of case management strategy. Maybe that person is not best placed to give you advice on networking or, how to develop your own personal brand. If that's the case, then it's up to people like me actually managing that process in the organization to put that in as a sort of like an add-on or like a bolt-on, essentially. If you think about networking, it's 2024, right? We all remember what it was like during lockdown, during COVID. Actually, you didn't even have the opportunity to go and meet anyone. And I think that there's many issues that's created, but one of the issues is that I see people coming into the workforce now in 2024, and they've never actually been in an environment where they're expected to develop a network professionally, and they've never been given the guidance about, look, you need to go and talk to this person. One of the pieces of advice I give to graduates is, look, find a person who's going to unlock this for you, whatever it is, whether it's moving into a different firm or if it's moving into a different part of the business, find that person who can unlock that for you and just phone them up and introduce yourself. And at least 70% of the time, whoever it is I'm talking to won't do that. They would go, oh, and the next time you talk to them, so, did you speak to that person? Oh, well, I sent them an email. Yeah, that's not what we said. Okay, because that email will be buried. I can guarantee it. And this maybe goes back to what we were saying about those people in the organization being super busy. Obviously, they're a high performing loss adjuster, major loss or a senior leader. You need to put yourself on their radar, right? And actually, there's nothing wrong with that. People have contacted me at Crawford and elsewhere and say, look, I'm just looking for a bit of guidance. And I'll always give that advice. I see a lot of stuff going on in the profession more generally, stuff like ICANN, which is the Insurance Cultural Awareness Network, and things like that, where they're actually putting those opportunities in place for someone who's just coming into the profession to actually get in front or get to know people. And I think that's brilliant. I'm a big advocate for that.
So what you're saying, which I have to say I've seen as well, but I've been around for so many years, it's really quite difficult to name the numbers, that we're losing some of the social skills that used to be really, really important in the days when you didn't have email to hide behind. So, Stephen, are you actually seeing that there's this lack of social skills that is actually then hindering the networking aspect of it?
I don't know. I like to be a little bit more optimistic, actually, because what I do see is that through these kind of committees and networking events and LinkedIn, I do see the people who back themselves and are a bit more, have got something about them and want to get ahead in loss adjusting. They're the people who I see reaching out to me or to others for advice and getting involved in networking, because there are things out there now. I would probably say more than ever, it's easier to connect with people via, people like Luke who are connecting their talent with potential, giving their encouragement, get in touch with adjusters who can help them find that mentor. It's never been easier, I don't think, to find your mentor and to get out there, invest in yourself. And that's what some adjusters have kind of fed back to me, is that you've got to back yourself, you've got to invest in yourself, and you've got to make those steps to get out there and meet people. But yeah, I do agree that it's easier to hide behind things, to be a bit more passive and try and let things come to you. But I am encouraged to see that even adjusters from all over the world, I get messages from, adjusters in Kenya or Ghana or Indonesia or wherever, who are looking to get on and connect and meet people and broaden their network. And it's great to see. So yeah, I'm trying to be a bit more positive about it.
So, turning that on its head, can anybody be a mentor?
Well, it depends. Again, it comes back to what you're trying to achieve, what you can offer, right? And, can anyone be a mentor? Yes, but can anyone be a good mentor or a good, I think you've got to learn those skills. There is training, coaching models and all that kind of thing, which adjusters really should have in their toolbox. I think mentoring has got to be part of the expectations. You get more senior in your career and you start to see retirement or winding down is starting to appear on the horizon. And I do see this actually, a lot of adjusters saying, look, I really want to give something back to the organization. Again, we're really lucky that we've managed to retain quite a lot of our more senior adjusters. Some of them are quite happy to hang up the boots and retire and don't want to be part of that conversation. And that's absolutely fine. After 35 years of handling insurance claims, I think you'd be perfectly within your rights to say, look, I've had enough. I don't want to be involved. I can sit in the garden. 100%, nothing wrong with that. I've also seen people who want to stay in the business and get involved in training and developing the next generation of adjusters. And it's those people who I think have got the most value to add to the conversation. But I think in answer to your question, can anyone be a mentor? Well, yeah, but good mentors are really hard to find. And actually, we are finding that we have to be sometimes a little bit selective. What other skills can we help you bring back into the organization to help us develop our people?
So, we've already touched on it once, but with Bert having just blown his way around the UK, I was actually having a discussion before Bert appeared last week with a number of senior adjusters about the time pressure that they had on the caseloads, because we've had a whole series of storms in a short period. How does the mentoring fit in with that? They're under so much pressure, some people who are trying to mentor and also manage their caseloads.
I think, well, first of all, it's difficult to expect senior adjusters or anyone senior in the organization to give over their time to help develop someone, right? So I said earlier that I think mentoring should be an expectation. I don't think it necessarily has to be that. I think it just, again, it has to be part of the sort of bundle of tools that an organization can use to actually develop people. But senior adjusters only have a limited amount of time. And mentoring, unfortunately, gets seen, or any sort of personal, professional development really just gets pushed down the list of things that needs to be done on a daily basis.
So therefore, is it something that has to be an element of an external function in order to assist, or what? And on that emotive note, or a bit of a cliffhanger, we've completely run out of time. So where should the mentoring function actually be? Should it be internal? Should it be external? Should it be a mixture? Well, part 2 will explore the role of the internal and external mentoring, as well as the impact on mentoring on retention and development. You have been listening to part 1 of Sitting with Sue Insurance Questions Answered. where I've explored with Stephen and Luke the different strands of mentoring and what are the organisation and individual trying to actually achieve.